feel so lonesome. You hear me when I'm on. I've been driving my tail plant for you since I've been gone.
Louisiana is a long drive from where I live, but it's doable. I guess if your last name is Lewis or Clark, you could probably find your way by boat. But if I were headed out from Greencastle, the only two routes I'd understand would be to transport said boat west to the Mississippi or south to the Ohio, then float west and then bust a left at Cairo, Illinois. I recently had the pleasure of visiting Louisiana twice in 30 days in two completely different worlds. Let's start with the obvious. La Nouvelle-Orléans, New Orleans, Nolans, NOLA, the Big Easy. I'm not sure why they call it the Big Easy. I found it to be quite difficult. Now, I'll admit the difficulty was of our own making, and it was written that I must be loyal to the nightmare of my choice. In the end, I'm from Indiana, so I call this place New Orleans. People say it smells here. It does. It smells like a mixture of salt water and fresh water, and of Delta Coast good times. I'm sure it will come as no surprise that the focal point of our conversation today will be the French Quarter. You've all heard of it, especially Bourbon Street, named after the Royal Bourbon family of France. Contrary to what may be popular assumption, Bourbon Street was not named after the whiskey. In fact, per the Google, legend has it that the whiskey was named after the street. You all know this as a place where people come to drink like fish, flash their privates, and otherwise act like morons. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it happens, just not while we were here. And I gotta say, the French Quarter was roughly 15% as dirty as I expected based on stories. And who gives a damn? I mean, look at this place. This is the oldest part of the city, first established by the French, then controlled by the Spanish, then back to the French. In the end, we conquered this town the American way, with cold, hard cash. I guess it was probably chunks or coins or bars of gold and silver, but cash wasn't around just yet, so don't give me any crap about it. With the streets just wide enough for about 2 horse-drawn wagons, on each side of the street you'll see the most iconic architectural marking of this town, which are the wrought iron railings of the second-story balconies. I don't know why, but I love them. Anyway, at the top of some of these pillars on the bottom, sometimes you'll see these. These are called Romeo catchers or Romeo spikes. Back in the old days, I bet you can guess what these were used for. I don't know why, but I find that cool as hell.
There's a little plaque here. I'll try to get you to take a good look at it. Her granddaughter, Mary Elise, was born here. She grew up.
Their generator won't get that far. Or in a bad condition, you gotta have these Baptist jobs. I'm crying, please.
For many years, the city of New Orleans has had ordinances in place to preserve the quarter to continue to look exactly the way it does and assist the ownership in doing so. If your door needs replaced, you are not running to Menards. If your windows need replaced, you are not running to Lowe's. You're recreating a new, custom-built version of what you had in whatever way you can. And for the foreseeable future, the gas lights of the late 1700s continue to burn. Walking these streets at night, one can kind of imagine how this city has gotten its reputation for being dangerous, mysterious, bandits hiding around every corner. Picture Bourbon Street without the crowd, without the neon signs. No light at all other than these gas lights. Wait, is that Tom Cruise? Run, he bites!
I've been driving my Terry flat now since I've been gone.
Brother bought a coconut, he bought it for the dime. His sister had another one, she paid it for the lime. She put the lime in the coconut, she drank and poured up. She put the lime in the coconut, she drank and poured up. She put the lime in the coconut, she drank and poured up. She put the lime in the coconut, she called the doctor, woke him up and said, "Doctor, ain't there nothing I can take?" I said, "Doctor."
Despite being an extremely Catholic town, this city also has a very close relationship with the occult. If I knew half the stories of vampires, witches, voodoo, and otherwise demented evil or cruel behavior that has supposedly gone on around these streets, you'd stop listening. So I'll leave you with some homework. Everybody loves homework.
Drank and poured up, put the lime in the coconut. You called your doctor, woke him up, said, "Doctor, ain't there nothing I can take?" I said, "Doctor, to relieve his bellyache." I said, "Doctor, ain't there nothing I can..."
Check out the story of the blood-sucking Carter brothers from the 1930s who maintained several prisoners at all times that they could visit each night, reopen their wounds, and drink their blood. That is, until one of the prisoners, having not been tied securely, escaped and ran down the street screaming for help in the middle of the day. Purportedly, when these guys were arrested, they begged to be killed instead, stating that no matter how long they were in prison, upon their release they would have no choice but to return to their blood-sucking lifestyles.
Brother bought a coconut, he bought it for the dime. His sister had another one.
Check out the story of Madame Lalaurie from the 1830s. She wasn't quite as sick as the Carter brothers. She didn't drink other people's blood. She merely, purportedly, rubbed their blood on her skin to keep herself looking young. How did she collect their blood? Oh, well, she simply enjoyed torturing long-term enslaved prisoners, but who doesn't? She was one hell of a socialite around town until her house caught fire. Happy accident, the firefighters discovered her victims bound in a back room with no windows. The house you'll now see at 1140 Royale Street actually isn't the original because after the firefighters extinguished the flames and freed the poor bastards, an angry mob of citizens relit the damn thing and ran her out of town. These are just a couple of the stories you can find easily. If you're troubled enough to find them interesting, take it upon yourselves to keep searching for more. This portion of the character of New Orleans is so entrenched and so long-lived, it's long ago gone mainstream. Along with a multitude of voodoo shops selling incense, spell books, tarot cards, voodoo dolls, crystals, ceremonial herbs, and all other kinds of witchy shit, I present you with the Vampire Cafe. This town loves its parades. Taking in 2 cold ones at the Vampire Cafe, we got to enjoy 3 police-escorted parades. No floats, no marching bands, just some folks celebrating some special occasion who wanted to march down the street with a buzz in their brains and a drink in their hands. If you visit the Vampire Cafe and make a certain impression on your server, you may be provided with the location and password to a different establishment, a secret establishment. I'm not quite sure what kind of vibe you're supposed to give off, but I'm guessing that appearing to at least not be an asshole is criteria number one.
To play another song. But after this next song, we have to take a break.
How you doing, dude?
The witch doctor, I was in love with you. I told the witch doctor I was in love with you. And then the witch doctor, he told me what to do. He said that.
So what's the story here? Does somebody live here?
The owner of the building lived here. This was his party pad in this area, and they lived in the back for several years when they first moved here. Yeah, and so this was their clubhouse, and so we started renting it for a bar, and this is amazing. Yeah.
And you can only come here by invitation.
Yeah, just people that we trust.
Well, I promise that we're just nerdy YouTube people.
That's
so
cool.
This isn't like an expose.
The only thing we ask is don't post the password or the address, and everything else
Okay.
is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've already forgotten the password.
I'll give you our hash.
We're influencers.
Cool.
Hey, I met this guy. We met downstairs. Thanks to the Vampire Cafe, we got to hang out on one of these balconies and enjoy the elevated view of Bourbon. We also met these fine folks. I'm not positive, but I believe their names were Gary, Cheryl, and Cheryl. We laughed at their jokes, they laughed at ours. I'm positive they're still telling their friends about the riveting conversation they enjoyed with two intellectuals from Indiana who made an unexpected, indescribable impact on their lives over two unplanned drinks in a secret club in New Orleans.
I sent for my baby, and she don't come.
You'd have to take some risk and eat at some pretty sketchy places to find a bad meal down here. As with any place with a rich history, the cuisine is extremely important to its fabric, and it shows. We started our culinary quest at Irene's, best lamb I've ever had. We had reservations at Brennan's the next morning, but we're up about 4 hours too early and decided to hit this place called Two Chicks Cafe. I had some kind of a dewy sausage breakfast po' boy, and everybody at Two Chicks was totally hitting on me, but I think that's just part of their shtick. Café Pontalba, if I'm saying that right, is where we landed for a late lunch on day 2. Stop in for a beer and stay for the food. It was here that I finally was able to eat alligator that wasn't fried. The blackened gator over the Caesar salad, very, very tasty, but I digest. It pretty much tastes like chicken. Judging from the decor and general setup of this place, it obviously has a history of a couple hundred years. I can relay none of that to you, but I can tell you one thing. These folks are serious about their bathroom. They are not asking around.
Shoot my Gatling gun. You made me love you, now your man have gone.
The oysters in Louisiana, produced by the brackish waters off their shores, are extremely tasty. Breakfast the last day was at Stanley's. Eggs Benedict, fried oysters, fried shrimp, fried soft-shell crab, mimosas. What more can you say? My hot wife and I always try to bring something back from our travels that we can enjoy forever. Whether it be the people we meet that we can stay in touch with, a language we try like hell to study, or a dish we can recreate. Cajun and Creole cuisine are far more diverse than they get credit for, but our culinary souvenir this time around was the simple dish known as étouffée. Say it with me now. Étouffée. Good, very good. This stuff can be a meal unto itself or slathered over a slab of fish or just about any other dish on the menu. Literally translated, étouffée means smothered or suffocated. My hot wife can teach you how to make it. Or you can learn the old-fashioned way, through the extremely modern method of traditional dispersion of folk wisdom and information. Google. In the run-up to the trip, I was getting noticeably annoyed with my hot wife regarding the attire she was insisting I bring along. She'd spent a great deal of time down here in the past and was hell-bent on not looking like tourists. So she insisted that we weren't walking around in normal vacation attire, explaining to me it's just not the way the proud citizens of this area dress. To my embarrassment and my surprise, she was right. Unless you're content with just wandering up and down Bourbon Street and getting sloshed, this place is fancy. Fancy like old days fancy. Like I'd feel comfortable wearing a top hat in public fancy. After a great dinner at Irene's, we stopped in for a burlesque show at Royal Sonesta. I didn't take any footage of the naked ladies because, well, I assumed that might be frowned upon. So you'll have to visit in person for the full show. But let's enjoy a piece of the opening act with the host.
As long as I got hold of that string, I've been singing so and so. Oh, if I should ever let go, I got the world on a string. I'm singing on a rainbow. I got that string. Look at me, can you see I've been loving?
But consider yourself warned. Even following a fancy night out in New Orleans, it's commonplace in the morning for visitors to feel right about like this here.
I got ramming on my mind.
But if you happen to be pressed for time or you're just passing through town and want to catch a quick glimpse of all the cool stuff, I'd highly recommend Jackson Square. Standing here, you'll see several blocks of the quarter, St. Louis Basilica, the Cabildo Building, if I'm saying that right, where the Louisiana Purchase was signed, some of the oldest restaurants in the neighborhood, and the levees that hold all of this together. You can visit the famous Café du Mont for a beignet, but you better have half a day to kill waiting in line and one hell of a hankering for a fancy French donut. Hey, buddy. Hey, we're from Indiana.
I don't want to talk right now.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk right now.
Hey, you think you could take us past Madame LaLaurie's house, show us some sights? We ride in the cart, you walk?
Please,
what do you
all
say?
right, look, I'm here every damn day. I pull the cart, you sit in it, And that's how it works. So pay the guy and piss off.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
The namesake for the square is none other than our 7th president, Andrew Jackson. Erected in 1856, 11 years after his death, a valiant statue of the Southern gentleman stands proudly in the center, depicting Mr. Jackson reviewing his troops during the 1815 Battle of New Orleans. It's widely speculated that, had he been around for the Civil War, he may have joined the Confederacy, having been a slave owner himself. Therefore, not surprising, the epitaph that reads that the Union must and shall be preserved was absent until the Union occupation of the city during the latter part of the war. While this is a quote from Jackson way back in 1830, when the first grumblings of separatism were beginning in hushed tones, Union troops carved it into the stone 30-some years later.
I believe that my time ain't long. But I'm leaving this morning. I believe I will go back home.
But it was time to explore more of the great state of Louisiana, to head out into the less developed and less known. This portion of the experience called for a more rugged cast and crew, men with true grit, i.e., the other 3 Balka men of DuBois County, Indiana. To get to St. Bernard Parish from New Orleans, you head east through the lower 9th Ward, which was the heaviest hit part of the city during Hurricane Katrina. You know you're heading off grid when you see a maze runner-style wall or levee like this one, with watertight doors to try to fend off the sea during its angriest hours. Everything you see down here other than the single-lane, raisable steel bridge was built after Katrina, because everything was wiped completely off the face of the earth. This is the camp we were stationed at for the entire operation, Penthouse Accommodations. Now, if you're in this area, whether permanently or temporarily, in the words of Lieutenant Aldo Rain, you're doing one thing and one thing only: not killing Nazis, fishing. And, unless you're familiar with the channels that carve out the dry lands of the marsh, their shapes, how they connect, and where the shallow spots are, you're not going to want to go ripping around in a rented boat. For that matter, I doubt you could find a place to rent one unless you want to do so way back on more solid ground and head out for quite a long ride. Much of this land is relatively uninhabitable. It's wild, it's unforgiving, it doesn't give a f about you. Between the alligators, the snakes, the bugs, and whatever else might be stalking around in the tall grass and deep mud, if you decided to wander off too far from the road and fall victim to any of the above out here, you likely wouldn't be found. If you were, your bones would be squeaky clean. This is Captain Ted Tagano, owner and operator of Scales and Tails Charters and Lodging. A true man of the sea, or man of the marsh, as it was, he grew up fishing these waters and never stopped. As a young man, he explained to his parents that he was going to make a living at it one way or another. He shared stories of the local landscape prior to the hurricane, how things changed afterward, and some harrowing stories of riding out the next hurricane solo at his camp. I then shared one of my most harrowing stories. But, mine was bullshit.
So then I told him, I just looked at him and I said, listen, man, I'm not going to jail for you or anybody.
I had hoped to learn of some southern rock music I'd never heard of before to play during this portion of our talk. So I asked Captain Ted what type of music he listened to when he was growing up. He explained he was too busy playing sports and fishing as a teenager and couldn't really name a single artist or band he'd ever even paid attention to. Kind of had to go with my gut on this one. So for your listening pleasure, I present you with the only music that came to mind idling through the opening channel and then blasting through the rest. One of the most well-known, quintessential Southern rock bands ever. Each member hailing from friggin' California. The waters of the marsh off St. Bernard are typically calm. This isn't much of a representation of what I'm talking about, but the weather had been quite out of the ordinary for several days, making the sea a little touchy, if you will. Something familiar standing among father and brethren in waters unknown, that common awareness of everyone's line and bait, that economy of motion calling the shots of who stands where, which direction they cast, and which direction they shuffle their feet after the splash. A vessel of this size with 4 fishermen and 1 captain becomes a living, breathing thing all of its own.
Consolate my mind. Some pretty mama, she start breaking down, stop breaking down. Please stop breaking down. Now this stuff I gotta bust your brain down, baby. Woo-hoo. It'll make you lose your mind. I can't walk the streets now to consolate my mind. Some no good woman now, she start breaking down. Please stop breaking down. The stuff I gotta bust your brain out, baby. Woo, it'll make you lose your mind. You know the Saturday night women now, they love to ape and clown. They won't do nothing but tell you, reputation down, stop breaking down. Please stop breaking down. The stuff I gotta bust your brain down, baby. Woo, it'll make you lose your mind. Now I gave my baby that 99 degree. She jump up and throw the pistol down on me, stop breaking down. Please start breaking down. The stuff I got to put your brain down, baby. Ooh, it'll make you lose your mind.
With the recent weather, we didn't really slay the redfish the way we expected. We did end up with a nice collection of trout, flounder, black drum, and 2 nice redfish. Being probably the lowest caliber fisherman on the vessel, the guilt of being the only one to drag in a redfish still lingers in my subconscious to this day.
Next to me. Get out of a race stance. You're not at racing. Get that off your hip. Get on your forearm. Oh, okay. Nice. Ride up. Bend up. Bend up. Easy. He's gonna do the work. He's gonna come around. If he starts going under the boat, you need to come down in the water with the rod tip. Okay? One more spin and that's her ass. Holy shit. Wow. And listen, this young lady, and you know why I'm saying that? Stand silent. Women don't speak in the fish world. Proven fact. They don't have They don't have a drum maker.
The males make noise.
The males make the noise.
Okay.
Come on. Are you mother humper?
To make matters even worse, 2 of these red devils chose my lure over the other 3 options they had within 30 minutes of each other.
The stuff I got to put your brain down, baby. Ooh, it'll make you lose your mind. You know the Saturday night women now. Got the mother and the red hot. Yeah, she got myself.
So let's cover a little bit of the cuisine down here as well. A little more down-home, stick-to-your-ribs fashion, appropriate after a day out on the water. Day 1, we hit Charlie's, which is just a couple miles back towards solid ground. The fine folks here couldn't have been more welcoming to 4 Yankees like us, especially dicks like me filming the whole thing. Plenty of y'alls, heavy lobster-infused soups, fried goodness, and po' boys with anything you can imagine.
Yes, she got 'em a sale, honey. Yes, she got 'em a sale, yes, yes. Hot tamales and the red hot. Yes, she got 'em a sale. Hot tamales and the red hot. Yes, she got 'em a sale. I got a letter from a girl in the room. Now she got something good she got to bring on soon now. It's hot tamales and the red hot. Yes, she got 'em a sale, honey. Yes, she got 'em a sale, yes. Hot tamales and the red hot. Yes, she got 'em a sale.
The next night, dinner was more of a stand-up situation, 10 feet or so from the dock. We returned with quite a catch, and Captain Ted got right to work. Nobody, in my experience, can remove the muscles of freshwater fish with nearly the surgical accuracy as my dad. But, if you can't tell, Captain Ted has definitely done this a time or 2 as well.
Yes, she got 'em for sale. I got a good such long and tall. She sleeps in the kitchen with a piece in the hall. Hot tamales and the red.
While the fish were being cleaned and divided up, one of the captain's mates was preparing something special, something divine. In one of the most traditional Cajun fashions, the boil culminated in a choir of cracking, sucking, gnawing, pleasure moans, and washing down with what were not the first beers of the day. Boiled alive shrimp, corn on the cob, potatoes, and boiled alive, caught earlier that day blue crabs. Now, the meat on a blue crab isn't nearly as easy to harvest as that of the snow crab. It's delicious and tastes very similar if you can get your mouth full. But sadly, due to the amount of beer that was consumed on the boat, my guess is plenty of the meat was ultimately left behind. Sorry, blue crabs, but those who play hard to get run the risk of ending up lonely. By the way, viewers, I just made up that saying, and you're welcome to use it as often as you like, as you wish. You're welcome.
Hot tamales and the red hot. Yeah, you got 'em a sale, I mean. Yes, you got 'em a sale. Hot tamales and the red hot. Yes, you got 'em a sale. Baby, don't mess around them hot tamales now, 'cause they're too black bad. Mess around them hot tamales. I'm gonna upset your back, gonna put your kidneys to sleep. I'll do the breakaway, you don't live them there, your heart to beat by now. Hot tamales 'cause the red hot. Yes, you got 'em a sale, I mean. Yes, you got 'em a sale, yeah. Hot tamales and the red hot. Yes, you got 'em a sale.
Coming off the water on the last day, it was time for that dreaded process of repacking. reorganizing what had been strewn all over the camp for the past 72 hours. But one last thrill awaited me on our way back to deliver Jeff to the New Orleans airport, showing father and brethren a tiny sliver of the French Quarter. Where, you ask? Well, where did we discuss would be the best spot to visit if you're short on time? You guessed it, Jackson Square. Thank you for paying such close attention. You are one hell of an audience. For that reason, you'll be familiar with the place we hit for dinner. The special that day? Blackened redfish smothered in etouffee. Oh, the irony is just killing you. You might recognize this gentleman from one of the opening frames, but he wasn't actually playing the song you heard. I saved this for last. Call me sentimental, a bleeding heart, overly dramatic, melodramatic, a romantic, a fool, I don't care. Being a Yankee in the Deep South, standing in a square named after a former slave owner, whose statue stands at the center, bearing that immortal phrase inscribed on it by the Union Army, still burned into your brain, and having at least a decent grasp on history, I felt the following clip to be an appropriate place to end this thing, and to portray, hopefully, a powerful message to leave you with. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed yourself and subscribe to my channel in case I ever pull off something like this in the future. In the words of Walter Cronkite and Celine Dion, that's the way it is. At this point, everybody still watching must be the cool kids. So here's a couple of things we left out.
Baby, right.
It's all right, Kevin.
We could be in bed by now. Where's our ride?